get this meeting started for public safety. Welcome, everyone. Looks like we're going to start out this last meeting of the year with our update from Chief Winstrom.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Oh, yep, thank you. Come with the glasses. All right, so our last crime statistics update for the year, and you show a nice trend here, and we've spoken about this, I think, for the last couple of years at these meetings, so I won't belabor too much, but as you can see, still trending in the right directions as far as auto thefts, and that was a really community-wide effort, everybody getting together, recognizing a crime, and not only does it benefit the owners of the vehicles, the victims of the crime, but also we saw so many times that these were very young people which were committing these crimes. So seeing them on a better path makes us a win for the whole city. Auto theft totals year to date lowest in at least my time here. Robbery totals not. There's no trends or any statistical significance that we've seen in these numbers. There's a bump from last year, but as you can see, a decline overall. But again, our crime analysts do an excellent job, and we haven't seen anything out of the ordinary. This isn't projecting any negatives in the future. Same with aggravated assaults, pretty consistent from last year. Homicide totals is definitely a win as far as a decline for us. We've seen homicides in many cities across the country fall this year for many reasons. If I had to point to one reason in Grand Rapids, I will say our statistics are slightly better than the nationwide average of declines. In November 6th of last year, where we had 3 individuals killed in one day, was really, I think, a turning point for us, where I was out there with members of the department and members of the community and just going door to door talking to neighbors, and you got the real sense that the city had enough, and not just obviously the police department, but all our partners in the city and just the community. And when you have a city that isn't going to become numb to this sort of thing, that's when you have the recipe for success. And I hope that I'm standing here a year from now talking about even greater success in these numbers. Other quick updates: our detectives working extremely hard. Of the 13 murders that we've had this year, 9 of them have already been cleared by arrest. Still working hard, not only on those, but on previous years. As you can see, 2023's number is 67%. 4 of those that we solved in 2023 were solved this year. We're going to continue. I don't even like to use the term cold case. I speak to families on a regular basis from homicides going to as far back as 1999, and we are focused on justice and closure for these families. And so you can see the numbers for years past. I like to see those increased over time as well. Unfortunately, we saw 32 of our neighbors here die of fentanyl overdoses this year, so something that's plaguing us and that we'll keep an eye on moving forward. And the proactivity of the police officers done in a very safe manner to take 420 illegally possessed guns off the street. That's just through November. I know checking the totals for the other day, there was an individual, I believe it was Sunday morning, who threatened somebody up by my house on Plainfield. Traffic stop later. He had a AR-15, 2 illegal handguns in the car, convicted felon, all taken with no use of force needed. I think this individual has some serious prison time ahead of him, but that was because he threatened to shoot someone, and proactivity by the officers going out there, getting it done, and getting it done very safely. So those 420 illegally possessed guns that's hundreds of stories of successful and safe proactive policing. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Chief. That's I'm always glad to hear these reports, especially the homicides that we were able to bring people to justice for that and bring some closure for those families, knowing personally what that feels like. So we're very grateful for the work that your department continues to do.
I'll pass that on,
This
Commissioner.
community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues? All right, thank you very much.
Just, I wasn't quick enough on the draw, but just want to thank you for the work that your department has done, and we appreciate being able to partner with you through our Cure Violence initiatives with as well as other community groups as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for that. And I will say, we had high numbers the first year that I was here in 2022, and I will get questions from the media and even sometimes the community groups. What are you doing, Eric Winstrom, what are you doing about the gun crime? And my answer was, hey, we're doing everything we can, but what's everybody else doing? And Cure Violence is an excellent example of the partnership that we've gotten that's really gotten the city going in the right direction. So I appreciate you.
Of the 32 overdoses, what's the breakdown on those particular individuals? Are they transitional living individuals? Is it?
Most of them were not unhoused. I think we probably have a handful of unhoused individuals that have passed away, but we had one of our most recent one. We had 2 individuals that died from a hot dose of, I believe, what they thought was cocaine. It was tainted with fentanyl. And that was in an apartment building. Houses, it goes pretty evenly across demographic lines as far as race, income, et cetera. It's difficult to find trends. It's impacted geographically the entire city pretty much in a blanket manner. So we're seeing it everywhere. And sorry, Pastor, I could actually probably break down those numbers for you. Of those numbers, get either geography, age, race, things like that to share with the committee next meeting.
Thanks, Chief. Colleagues? Make sure I'm going to turn slowly. All right, thanks again, Chief. We appreciate you. Next up, we have our wildlife management. We're back up quick. We've had some developments. Mr. Hurt?
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for having me back. Another update on wildlife management. Just to kind of remind you of the philosophy that we had and some of the goals of coexisting with the animals in our city. And we've been working the last couple of years trying to look at a regional approach, not only with the city of Grand Rapids, but our partners around us, including Kent County. I know you've seen this before. I'm just kind of bringing it back in reminder. At our last meeting, we presented some options to you in terms of moving forward with a potential for a pilot hunt. We presented that to the City Commission as well. Both bodies encouraged us to move forward with that. Since that time, we've been working on a public engagement and logistics to try to put that pilot together. We've based on some new learnings that we've had along the way. We are intending to defer that hunt on publicly owned property until the fall of 2025. And I'll explain a little bit of that for you. We had an open engagement meeting just before the City Commission meeting back on December 12th. We included partners from the Michigan National Deer Association. They attended. We had a really good turnout. We had 20 people that showed up. Of those that showed up, 13 were in support of the pilot. 1 was opposed. The other ones refrained from, actually a couple have left before we did any kind of voting, but others didn't really provide an opinion one way or the other. In addition to that, we did an online survey. And of those folks who filled out the survey at that time was 12. 75% of them were not in favor of moving forward with a pilot. Since that time, after we had the City Commission meeting, additional feedback has been received from the neighborhood, and Mr. James Smith is here. Want to raise your hand, Mr. Smith? Who helped participate in going door to door, looking for some additional support in favor or against, and came with a petition he submitted to the city. 53 people signed the petition against the pilot. That represented 39 households in the immediate area, not only adjacent to or across the street from the property. Of the parcels that were immediately adjacent to the 960 Bristol, 42% opposed the pilot archery deer hunt. That caused us to pause, perhaps look at pivoting. Majority of the folks that are near that area were not in favor of this. So, and we did also explore an additional private property owner who was across the street from Bristol. I think it's 27 acres, who was interested in that, but the owner indicated they would not only participate if the city participated in our pilot hunt. So they chose not to participate going forward. So based on that community feedback, as well as consultation with the Parks and Recreation Director, staff does not intend to move forward with the initiative for January 2025. Additional time would allow for more meaningful engagement, more education, and will allow for the benefit of additional data and research from the countywide study that I've shared with you before. In the interim, staff will focus on educating residents about options on private property and on gaining additional insight that might inform a future hunt on public land. We expect to continue working with the Michigan National Deer Association on these efforts. And I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Can you go back to the second slide and talk about the property owner, the private property owner that said?
It's on the bottom.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we through the National Deer Association, they approached the private property owner.
Okay.
It's a large, I think it's more like a mining property across the street from the 960 Bristol. They were interested in participating if the city was doing their pilot, and when the city announced that we were going to pause, they're not interested in doing it themselves.
But they're potentially interested if we come back into the picture next year.
That was my understanding, yes.
Okay. And then I guess some of the feedback that I heard too was about the closeness and distance of a bow and arrow. Like, if there could even be information on the distance on how far it can travel. Like, I think one of the things in the presentation about moving forward was being 150 yards away from a building.
Structure,
So then
unless
thinking
the property
about.
owner gave you permission.
Huh?
Unless the property owner gave you permission to be closer.
Yes. So listening to some of the testimony at the last meeting, I wonder if there can be even some type of visual demonstration to show the distance of how far an arrow can actually go, right? If somebody's using a bow and arrow, and our different bows, will they allow the arrow to travel farther than other ones, right? And if that's
They do.
something that, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because those are the kind of questions that people are asking because they don't understand or they don't know. And if you've never been in that space of hunting or even shooting a bow and arrow, you don't really understand what that means. You just have a fear of the unknown. What if it crosses this space? And what if it harms, my child or my dog or any of my animals? And I think those are just some of the concerns that people have with it. But I think we're kind of in a cycle, right? We need to do something, trying to do those things appropriately and safely. So the education piece is going to be really helpful. I'm just wondering what other pieces we can add in there to help people really visualize what this is going to look like.
Like some graphics, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could add some things.
Colleagues, Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I still wanted to thank you all and the staff for your hard work on putting this together. I think that's just, how things work from time to time. The city comes up with an idea or proposed solution, and people in the community have the choice to give input on that. I think that's a great idea. Maybe some graphics. I know a lot of people when they're scrolling on social media or wherever, it's a very visual environment. So maybe seeing some of that might help ease some concerns as to what in reality a pilot like that might look like. So, and I still think there's, some significant value in, still engaging with some of the property owners in that area too. I think there's a lot of parcels of land that are dozens of acres. And so if there's, individuals, whether they're part of the NDA or not, who are willing to partner with them to safely test something out, I think there's still some value in a learning opportunity from the city to see how a partnership like that might look. And then once we get some more of the comprehensive data from the MDNR and look at next year, I think that would still really prepare us and put us in a good spot. So all in all, that to say, I don't think that this engagement process was, I think there was still a lot that we gained from it. So thank you.
There'll be some continued engagement going forward.
Absolutely. Edie? I'm going slow. Yes, City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner, for your comments. I do want to thank the staff because a lot of work did go into this, as you alluded to, in a very short amount of time, and being responsive and getting something done ahead of the countywide effort. But what we'll do is we'll take the feedback that we've obtained, at least based on our experience, and share that with the countywide task force, with our other community partners, and perhaps we can do something more comprehensively countywide that will be more educational and have that impact. But what we'll do is we'll certainly forward our experience to them and make them aware of the outcome.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Hurt. Looking forward to seeing where we can get with this. And I think some of the data collection with GVSU will also help speak to that education piece even more.
Absolutely.
As we continue to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last but not least, we have the Grand Rapids Fire Department update regarding the Heart of West Michigan Disaster Relief Fund.
Good afternoon. Across the nation, the United Way is the lead in establishing and managing local disaster relief funds. This is one puzzle piece in planning for future recovery needs. Disaster relief in Southwest Michigan was realized with the tornado in May of this year. The city of Kalamazoo has seen great benefit, realized great benefit with the established disaster relief fund for their community being the fastest and most reliable and flexible tool responding to crisis and natural disasters. All across Michigan and the country, there are examples of established local community disaster relief funds. Certainly on a national level, Southwest Louisiana sees its share of disasters and has realized significant relief from this. So the fire department would like to introduce, on behalf of the emergency manager as well, Michelle Van Dyke, CEO of Heart of West Michigan United Way. Michelle?
Thanks so much, Keith. I'm here today just to explain a little bit about what our plans would be at Heart of West Michigan United Way around a disaster fund. I'm taking learnings from others in other United Ways around the country, primarily in discussions with United Way of South Central Michigan, as Keith talked about the disaster fund that they had in place for their tornadoes in May, but their disaster fund goes back many years. Their advice is to raise funds during the good times and to maintain a minimum level of funding that is readily available in the case of a disaster. Clearly, if there is a disaster that hits, additional fundraising would be done at that time as well to supplement the fund. But their recommendation is that you keep a minimum of $100,000 in what they call blue sky. You know, when things are good, it's always easier to raise money. The funding would come from private companies, municipalities, businesses, foundations, and the like. It comes from all across the community. And all of those funds are pooled together into one fund. The parameters or criteria around funding during a disaster or immediately following a disaster are set by the disaster. So there's not set criteria, although there would be some preliminary work done. So the foundation is set, and we're not starting from zero every time there is a disaster and decisions need to be made. But it really depends on what's happening, how many people are affected. So we would make those decisions at that time very collaboratively. We're working with the community foundation, with nonprofit providers, making sure that we understand what the needs are of the community and how to respond. The funds at the time would be distributed through nonprofit agencies, much like we did with the COVID emergency fund, response fund that we put together. Those funds were dispersed to nonprofits and then on to individuals to meet the immediate and emergency needs of those individuals. So what is United Way's role? We would be the fiduciary of these funds. We would receive as a 501c3 the funds and do all donor and tax reporting. We would assist with the fundraising and then collect an administrative fee, just depending again on what's going on. In time of disaster, we would be the ones that would help to coordinate setting the criteria for how the funding would take place and to whom. We would develop the applications for funding and remit the funds. So essentially, from beginning to end, we would be taking care of that process.
So how will this fund help Grand Rapids? Leaning forward to have a disaster fund ready to be utilized to support recovery efforts. Supporting community members who are impacted by disaster and need additional assistance outside of insurance or state or federal assistance. The ability to support impacted community members when disasters don't meet state and federal thresholds for assistance. And providing Grand Rapids area a trusted avenue to support community members impacted by disaster in a coordinated and trusted manner. Do we have any questions?
I just have a couple. First thing that popped in my mind was always need to turn that on. So who determines what constitutes a disaster?
It's a great question. There needs to be a definition ahead of time. We would most likely work with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, which, believe it or not, actually does exist. But what they would say is that a disaster is defined as a disruptive situation or event. It could be unforeseen, sudden event that is either natural or human-made, that overwhelms the capacity of the local nonprofits, of local officials, of any survivors of that disaster, that necessitates a request for external assistance. So that would be one criteria. But then there would be what we would call activation triggers, so that what we would look at is there a significant loss of life, injury, or displacement of individuals? For instance, what population is affected, and is there a impact on the community that we cannot overcome without external assistance? So there's specific triggers that we would put into place once we get this formalized.
Thank you. And then the other question was, how do you determine what that baseline is? Because, everything doesn't affect everybody the same way. And is there a specific cutoff? This is $20,000 is the most that we're going to give.
Oh, yeah, and that would be set by the disaster, so it would really depend on what's happening. Is it wide scale? Is it across the county? Is it in specific parts of the city? We think about the straight line winds that came through and impacted the north part of our city. That would have been a great example. We were getting calls in to 211 from people who needed help removing trees and debris from their yard and those kinds of things. And that would have been a great example of a time where we would have gotten together collaboratively to look at, does this meet the criteria for the disaster fund? And if so, what do we do? How much gets dispensed? How much do we need to ask for in terms of support?
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Mr. Brown?
I tried to be quicker that time.
Thank you, I so appreciate
And
that.
I pulled this off, so sorry about that. As I was sitting there listening, I'm thinking, so I heard about the Center for Philanthropy.
Disaster philanthropy, yeah.
Yeah, that one. But would, declarations of disasters from government agencies, be it federal, state, or whatever, would that have bearing on mobilization of this fund as well?
Absolutely. That would be one of the things that we would be looking at. But not necessarily. Not everything rises to that level, but we would still, as a community, consider it a disaster.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is primarily through agencies, correct, and not individual or residential basis, correct?
It would be, yeah. It's very difficult for United Way to give individual compensation. Much easier for us to work through nonprofits who in turn then work with the individuals and their clients to make sure that their emergency needs are met.
Mr. Goy?
I guess I have some questions because I'm assuming that this proposal is a response to what had happened with the water main break on Adams Street.
It is not in direct response to that. We've actually been working on this for quite a while, and especially after the tornadoes in Kalamazoo went through. We as a community, and I think in emergency management, thinking through, what do we do if this happened to us? And so we've actually been working on this for quite some time. Keith, I don't know if you wanted to address.
No, I think that covers it.
I'll just add. So, yes, the United Way, I think, as Ms. Mundyke indicated before, they previously had a local disaster fund during the pandemic and have been discussing reactivating it. I think it was a confluence of events, both the previous effort and our recent experience, that at least caused the city to revisit what other resources we have beyond federal and state funding in our local community that re-sparked at least a higher level of interest in really getting this benefit for our community set up. So
one of the reasons that I've heard in meeting with those who were impacted by the water main break was that their insurance company wouldn't cover it because it was a disaster that came from the water that came from underneath the ground rather than from rainstorms or tornadoes and all those kinds of things. Will that have an impact on how this fund will be distributed? Are there certain things that they will not cover, or is it just like I think you mentioned something about a broad definition of what's considered a disaster?
Yeah, and we haven't gotten far enough down into exactly what it would cover, but certainly a human-made disaster is covered under the definition that we're working with right now. So. It's specifically a water main break that affects, a block or two. I don't know that we would be considering that a significant displacement or loss, but we don't have that set yet, Commissioner.
And also in your presentation, you mentioned, I don't know what slide that is, the United Way's role as a fiduciary.
Yeah.
You said in the time of disaster, coordinate setting funding criteria. I'm wondering how long that process will be in order to set that funding criteria rather than having it already set ahead of time. Because sometimes when these things happen, these folks need money, support right away rather than can I have to go through this bureaucratic process of being able to receive.
We have experience with the COVID response fund that we put together, and that criteria was set in about 2 hours. So it was instantaneous. I think some of this work, as you suggested, I mean, you can set foundation ahead of time and say, here is the criteria that will stand for regardless of what the disaster is. But then by disaster, we have to go back and say, okay, what fits? What's the dollar amount? What's the area? What and start to just put those parameters around it based on the disaster at hand. But there are fundamentals, to be sure, that can be set regardless of what the situation is.
Madam Chair, I think my concern is the comment that incidents like what we have experienced in the Third Ward may not be covered because it's not big enough. That's a concern that I really have, because these folks, yeah, maybe there was only 12, 14 households, but it's 12, 14 households who are impacted by it. And then then to have this kind of funding, which I think we need, is just that for them not to be able to access it still doesn't solve the problem that we're dealing with.
But now, this isn't, it's not ready yet, right?
Correct.
Is my understanding?
Right, correct.
And so when do you have a timeline in mind, or when do you all think this will be able to be set? And then if you're just doing it, that means there's no money in there right now.
There is no
Correct.
money in there right now. We've already started to talk with funders about this, just, kind of, on the what if we were to do this, would you be interested? We're already starting to work with our friends in Kalamazoo, and I've, in fact, this morning got their documentation around what they've done and how they set their criteria and all of that information so that we can start to put that together. And then we are also working with United Way Worldwide on a potential opportunity for them to help us fund the start of all of this.
And so the question, and I think maybe Commissioner Goy, this might be kind of going towards what your question is like this particular incident, like this is on the forefront of everybody's mind right now, right? Is there the opportunity, if some funding comes through right now, that would be able to impact this group of people? Because it isn't just 2 blocks, it's a lot of people, like 12, 14, too many. Right?
Right, yeah.
Will this be able to do this retroactively and be able to help them with some of the needs that they have, since their insurance is not supporting?
Potentially, yes. Yeah, we're working on that, separate from this, setting up a long-term disaster fund, looking at the short term, and what's immediately in front of us, but we're viewing this as a long-term solution, ongoing solution for this community, because disaster will strike. I mean, we hope it doesn't, but we know eventually there's going to be a tornado, or there's going to be flooding that does significantly impact this community. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you.
Commissioner?
Appreciate that.
Question?
Let me hit them and we'll come back to you.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation, and it's fascinating to me because what you just said is there, at some point there will be an incident, and my question really has to do, you got a lot of coordination here, police, fire, military, I presume, weather, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have like an annual or maybe semi-annual scenario planning where you can take let's say a tornado hits, but it hits right near a school, and so there's pandemonium, not only with the people there, but with their parents and managing all that stuff. And I found in my Navy experience informs this, is that walking through this stuff is a really great training, activity that gets people in a mindset of knowing what to do.
Absolutely. And that, to this point in Allison Feroli's tenure, has been the focus. Developing the plans, being operationally ready. And that's where, with the Office of Emergency Management lying within the fire department, this is just a wonderful opportunity with the United Way to come together to begin planning for that, the recovery phase of it as well. But yeah, there is a lot of opportunity. There is a lot of that does take place on the city and then also county level.
Okay, one follow-up, and that is, does this tie into like state and federal, if there was some extended type of emergency? I'm thinking, well, it could be a train wreck, or, we have some pretty serious snowstorms about once every 30 years. Anyway, so that was a question.
Absolutely. So think back to the straight line winds that came through in August a year and a half ago. There was a federal declaration and assistance. That took time, though, working through that to get those agencies and bodies through to do that on site. inspection of what had happened, and then to get the services out to the community that needed it. So that is where this partnership is so very necessary, is to not only support that long-term, but that in the interim, as was spoken to by Michelle, the straight line wins and before that declaration occurs.
The last question or comment then is, I would just encourage, once you get to a certain point, to have public service announcements so that people can become aware of the coordination that's taking place in governmental and all that stuff, because I've been impressed with the amount of work that is done, that is coordination between all the departments here, both political and all the, just all the. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kettle.
Well, just relative to Bing's comments, it's drilling around in my head that you want to kind of keep something like this a bit sacrosanct, because it's for natural or human huge disasters, something that's unavoidable or unpredictable. If a water main breaks in your neighborhood and you get screwed up, to me, that's on the owner. And I think that the city needs to figure out a funding mechanism to fix that. That should be paid for by the city. It's our pipes, didn't work, we're the landlord, whatever. I would hate to see these two get convoluted in some way where you're drilling down on an emergency fund of that nature to backfill something that's rightfully the city's responsibility. So just one more thing to get the city manager mad at me, but
Yep. So I appreciate the feedback. I just want to be clear on the intent. Today's presentation was about the need to establish this resource in our city and not to deliberate the specific incident that happened, but I understand the questions and the comments because that's the most recent issue. And unfortunately, I'm not permitted to go beyond the remarks that we've already shared.
Pastor Golston?
Just curious, real quickly, to lift up, what efforts are being used to involve the community in providing the template, to design that template for this particular funding? Just for example, like in St. Clair, I didn't know what was used in that county or what was used in Kalamazoo to establish their programs as well.
We have not started that process yet, but it's a great call out and to be sure. In fact, I just talked with one of our service providers this afternoon and asked if they would be willing to be a voice at the table representing their clients. So that work is just starting, but thank you for that question.
Just one quick question. It was mentioned partnership with this, so just curious on what that concept of what the partnership with the city and this fund looks like.
From a standpoint of United Way and the city, we would look to the city to be one of the funders into this fund. We will also be asking the county, we will be asking other family foundations, private funders, just to help us seed this account so that it's available in an emergency. And then clearly, when there's a disaster, we'll be going back out and asking for emergency resources at that point again. But to seed it, it will be just an ask really in general across that base.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Matt Chair. I'll keep it quick. I don't know if City Manager, if you're looking for consensus on moving forward this or what the, I guess the ask or next direction is. But I think when we talk about, good governance being one of our city values, I think this absolutely in every way falls into that category. I think, especially if we can partner as a city with an organization that has the expertise in collecting, administering, raising these funds, I think that's a huge win for everybody involved. So it seems like I know this is where the conversation is starting. I think there's room for continued discussion around what exactly it looks like and how, but I would certainly be in support of moving this forward for broader discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's necessary, and all the tools, we always talk about how many tools we have in our tool belt to do things to meet the needs of our community, and this is another one. I would just add to Mr. Brown and Mr. Golston's remarks that having community at the table is vital to make sure that we are not setting up things that weed people out, as opposed to bringing them in and being able to allow them to access the things they need to take care of themselves and their families.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation. We have no other comments, questions. We appreciate the work that you're doing and look forward to hearing about the next steps as we continue to move forward. And that will bring a close to our public safety meeting at 1:10.